Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being with us. I'm Thomas Novelli, and I'm a senior reporter here at Defense One. I'm glad you could join us for the state of the Air Force and Space Force. Today's program marks the second installment of our three-part State of Defense video series and contributes to our broader special report examining the strategic, operational, and technological forces shaping the year ahead for the military services. As the Air Force and Space Force push forward with modernization efforts in response to rising global competition, air and space power is being reshaped by autonomy, digital systems, and operations in contested environments. From the rapid deployment of collaborative combat aircraft and new human-machine teaming concepts to sweeping acquisition reforms designed to deliver capability faster, the services are redefining how the future force is built and employed. In this installment, we'll examine how air and space forces are preparing for deterrence, crisis response, and high-end conflict. We'll explore how force design, procurement, and operational concepts are evolving for joint and coalition warfare, while also looking at lessons from rapid prototyping, the next generation of autonomous systems, and the challenges of operating in an increasingly contested space domain. A few quick housekeeping notes for our virtual audience. Before we begin, we want to thank our sponsors for their support in making this conversation possible and for helping bring together the government and industry community for this virtual event. If you're watching alongside colleagues, feel free to share the live stream link with your team. And lastly, today's program is being recorded and will be available on demand shortly, so you can revisit key insights or share it with your colleagues. And now, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Senator Deb Fischer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next conversation of today's State of Defense program. Congress plays a central role in shaping the future of American deterrence and homeland defense. As security competition intensifies and emerging technologies reshape the strategic landscape, lawmakers are guiding key investments and policies that influence how the U.S. builds and sustains its air and missile defense architecture. Senator Deb Fischer of Nebraska serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee and has been a leading congressional voice on nuclear deterrence, strategic forces, and the modernization of U.S. air and space defense capabilities. In this conversation, we'll discuss priorities across integrated air and missile defense, the evolving concept and spending on Golden Dome, the future of strategic deterrence, New START, and how the U.S. is balancing resilience, escalation management, and readiness in an increasingly contested air and space domain. Senator Fischer, I'm really excited to talk to you about your priorities, fluctuations in spending, ambitious defense programs, and a little bit later on, the current situation in Iran. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
So you have been in the Senate since 2013, and I'm very familiar with your work, not only on the Senate Armed Services Committee, but also the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, which you've chaired before, and as of last year are leading once again. So I'd like to hear about what some of your top priorities are as chair of this subcommittee, and what is that working relationship like with members across the aisle? Do other members, seem to be on board with your policy objectives?
Well, I believe that we have a really strong Senate Armed Services Committee to begin with. And all of us understand the threats that we face. And it's just working together in trying to address those threats. On the Stratfor subcommittee, I've been on that ever since I've been in the Senate. So this is now my 14th year, and I'm back to being chair of that committee. We have a really strong committee, and I'm very fortunate to have Senator Angus King as my ranking member. We agree, I would say, just about on everything that the subcommittee does. We understand, again, the threats that we face. We understand the importance of the programs that we have oversight over, whether that's our nuclear triad, and that includes the platform, but also the weapons themselves, whether it's our missile defense or space as a warfighting domain. Now we're looking at those three programs in our triad, the platforms. They're all coming due, I would say, at the same time. Obviously, the Sentinel program is front and center when we look at the cost that's involved, the use of our land, and specifically the timing of that program. As you know, it needs to be on schedule. And I have confidence that we will continue to move forward on that and be able to have a strong new program when it comes to our land lake at the Triad.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought up ICBM modernization. It's a topic that we're all too familiar with here at Defense One. I think one part of Sentinel, and you touched on this a little bit, that the American public might not be as aware of is the sheer size of the project. In a 2024 Wall Street Journal op-ed, you and Senator Roger Wicker referred to it as the largest U.S. government civil works project since the completion of the interstate highway system since the 1990s, which is a pretty incredible frame of reference there. Speaking with program officials last month, they detailed to me that it's going to require 5,000 miles of fiber optic cable that's going to be scattered across tens of thousands of square miles in 5 states, including Nebraska, of course. And while most of that footprint is going to be on existing government property, like you said, it's going to require private-owned or national land to support those 450 nuclear missiles. So my question is, how difficult is that going to be to acquire the land? And what are the other obstacles that you're tracking with a project of this magnitude?
I think as we look at the Sentinel program, our ICBM program, we want to make sure that we still have a very strong, safe, secure, viable land leg of that program as we transition into Sentinel. So first of all, we have to be able to maintain the Minuteman III until Sentinel is ready. We're working as a committee to make sure that we have that all laid out. So last year, I was able to secure language in the NDAA. It requires a strategy to sustain the Minuteman III until the Sentinel does reach its full capability. Also in last year's NDAA, we secured some language there that it permanently requires the Air Force to deploy at least 400 ICBMs, and that's at least 450 launch facilities. So we want to make sure that the deterrent capability that this land leg has is not lost as we transition from the Minuteman III to the Sentinel. For the Sentinel, obviously, the missile itself and the warhead, it's progressing. The big holdup has been the infrastructure, the building that has to take place, the launch facilities, the launch control centers that are out in the field. Nebraska, my state of Nebraska, and the Panhandle, Kimball, Nebraska is a community there, a small community. I give the Air Force credit that they're working with the community really well to kind of minimize the impacts of that construction that's going to be going on. We recently put into place the direct reporting program manager. And this is a confirmed position, a new position. General Dale White has that to lead our ICBM programs. So the reason we did that is so one person is going to have centralized authorities. They're going to be responsible. And that one person then will have a direct line to the secretary, to the deputy secretary, and General White then, he's been empowered to make the decisions. We need to have one person in charge so that they can lead the department in order to finalize the design, to make any major contract decisions. And we need to have that happen before the end of the calendar year. So once that happens, we're going to have a much better understanding of what the cost is, the schedule is, and other details. A lot of decisions have already been made. We're going to have to dig some new silos. But given how old some of the those silos are. It's my understanding from our briefings, it's going to be actually faster and it's going to be cheaper to dig those new ones. Right now, I don't anticipate that the Air Force is going to need to acquire any additional land that you had mentioned, but we'll see what the final impact is going to be on that. But it is a huge infrastructure project. It is a huge civil works project, and when you take into account that these missile fields, they're larger than some states. So we need to make sure that we get it right, and we need to take the time to make sure that we get it right so that we have the best system.
I've been to that site that you referenced in Kimball before, and you are right that it is very vast. There's a lot of ground to cover there. So we'll definitely be following that closely. You mentioned costs, and I'd like to go back to 2024 when the Pentagon informed Congress that Sentinel's cost had ballooned 81%. Like you mentioned, a huge part of that was the decision to not reuse the silos and to dig new ones. What was your reaction at that moment when you found out about that cost overrun? And what have you learned from the Air Force, Northrop Grumman, and other officials since that makes you feel like it's back on the right track now? I know you brought up General Dale White in that position as being a huge part of that. I know that some of the timeline has been adjusted, but I'm curious what your reaction was then and what your level of confidence is now.
Well, I'd tell you my first reaction was we need to keep moving ahead. We have to make this right. We have to figure out what went wrong. We have to make sure that we are going to be on track to have Sentinel deployed and make sure that it is the strong deterrent that we all know it will be. So from an initial feeling of, oh my gosh, what's going on here and how can we make it right? I think the report came through well. I think we're on the right track. Obviously, Senate Armed Services Committee took it very seriously, and as I mentioned earlier, that we were able to get language in the NDAA for a couple areas. We have General White on board now. And I believe we're on the right track. One person responsible, one person being able to make decisions, one person who can speak directly with the Secretary of War and move faster to get us to where we need to be. And
I think there is, of course, some pressing geopolitical tensions that are simmering amid this modernization. Last month, the New START treaty expired. You've pointed out that Russia has been in violation of that treaty for years and that China's nuclear arsenal is growing. Some experts have feared that this will lead to a renewed nuclear arms race. I'm curious, do you believe that the New START treaty needs to be renewed or a new treaty needs to be put in place? I'd love to get your reaction to that. And overall, what impact does the treaty's expiration have on the Sentinel modernization?
The world's more dangerous today than it's been any time since World War II. For the first time in our history, the United States faces two peer adversary nuclear powers. As I always say, Russia has already modernized most of its nuclear forces, and they've long had an advantage over us in their tactical nuclear weapons. China's expanding their programs, and in the commission report that came out in 2023, the terminology used in there is, there's a breathtaking pace. We heard Admiral Richards say that as STRATCOM commander. We've heard General Cotton say that as STRATCOM commander. The Chinese are moving at a breathtaking pace, and they're consistently beating our estimates. So modernizing our nuclear deterrent, it is not a choice in my view. It is a necessity. We have to remember our nuclear force structure. It was decided back in 2010, and the environment's obviously changed since then. So I would say all the assumptions that were made back then were incorrect. We thought Russia was going to be friendly. They're not, and China's not a lesser threat. So when we're looking at what we need for a treaty, I worry about only having bilateral discussions between the United States and Russia. The Chinese have given no indication that they would take part in any kind of negotiations. So I think we know that the Russians don't always follow the treaties, and to put ourselves in a position of limiting what we may need to do to protect our homeland, protect our country, I would hope that we would be able to enter into any pre-discussions even on a new treaty with our eyes wide open and understanding the threats that we have and what we should do. I worry about limiting our numbers when you look at what Russia and China, what China's doing, what Russia has and continues to do. For example, we have looked at having 100 of the B-21 bombers. We've had our STRATCOM commanders say they need at least 145. I think we have to consider all of that. I would suggest to the listeners here to read that bipartisan Strategic Posture Commission report that came out in 2023 to possibly have a better understanding of what we face as a country and what we need to do, and how that report came out against, I think most observers would have said it never would have been a unanimous bipartisan report, and it was, because the individuals involved were well versed in this, spent many years in this, and I think they laid things on the table in a very rational way.
I'm really glad you brought up the B-21. It was a question I had later. So I'm glad. It's great that you brought that up. Like you mentioned, too, there was that deal to accelerate production, and the plans were to originally buy 100 of those. You said, correctly, that some Air Force officials have argued for around 150. Recently, the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies made a push for 200 bombers to reduce the risk of losing a conflict with China. Given this current geopolitical environment, how many do you believe the U.S. needs?
Well, I try and listen to our experts on that, and I quote STRATCOM commanders on that a lot. I think they have made it clear they think at least 145. But when you look at the world we're in, and we'll see what they say in the future, I guess. What we have to consider when you look at the B-21s is there's two areas that they need to meet the requirements for. Number one, obviously, is STRATCOM's nuclear requirements, but also number two needs to be Indo-PACOM's. They have conventional needs that they're looking at, and so I think when the experts get together and compare what's going on with our adversaries to look at again, the threats we face, the needs that we have, the number may go up above 145 B-21s.
I think we can't, a huge part of this conversation, of course, is about defense spending. In this past budget cycle, reconciliation spending played a key part in funding defense priorities. Defense One reviewed a funding allocation plan last month, and it detailed really ambitious plans to spend all of that by the end of fiscal year 2026. So we're talking roughly 200 or so days. So quick question is just, is that possible? I mean, what are the challenges of expending that much funding in such a short period of time?
Well, the challenge is production capabilities that we have here in this country. We all know that those need to be ramped up. Working with private industry, whether it's munitions, whether it's with our planes, whether it's looking at the need we have with our ships. If you look at the numbers there, I think we all realize that we need to talk about opening another shipyard up to be able to meet the needs there. So is it realistic to think that it can all be spent? I think the better question would be is how do we make sure we move into the next phase of meeting the needs we have for our military? Whether that's on the production side, how do we encourage private industry to be able to expand? Obviously, that's multi-year contracts, so they know that when they make an investment, they're going to be able to have follow through on that investment. I think we need to be realistic about modern warfare and what we need for that, while still maintaining the basic structures that we continue to need for our military moving forward. So that's how I view it. I'm glad to see the talk there. I'm glad to see the administration make a strong commitment to our military, to our national defense, and for them to be realistic about what the needs are out there and what it will cost in order to meet those needs.
Of course. So there has also been some concerns from lawmakers about the transparency of reconciliation spending and the use of it in accordance with the House and Senate's intent. So, earlier this year, lawmakers pointed to a lack of clarity on how Golden Dome related reconciliation, for example, how those funds were being used. Do you feel like the administration and Pentagon has provided sufficient clarity on that to the Senate? And what will that difficulty be in cataloging that reconciliation spending for taxpayers?
Well, we need transparency when it comes to using taxpayer money, and that's just across the board, from the federal government to your city council, to be able to provide that transparency. But we also need to do our oversight as a Congress with the administration. So we are getting information about the military funding through reconciliation, where that's going. I can tell you Chairman Wicker has been very adamant, very strong with the department, saying that we have to have that, and he has committee support for that. When we look at Golden Dome, obviously this is a project that Americans are fascinated by and interested in, but our adversaries are also very fascinated by it. The United States has been very clear that we have to have a more robust missile defense architecture in order to defend the homeland. And I think we have a great opportunity to do this with Golden Dome. You know, I've had a lot of classified briefings with General Gutlein. I understand the department is still making decisions about the proposed architecture for Golden Dome. And this challenge isn't new. You know, I do chair this Stratfor subcommittee, and we put language in the NDAA in 2025, and it required the department to be able to develop a comprehensive an integrated architecture so that we could defend America against a variety of missile attacks. So this really was an effort for us to lay the groundwork for Golden Dome. It wasn't called Golden Dome at the time, but it really helped us to lay the groundwork there. And it helped the department really to get a head start, kind of jumpstart some of what was needed in order to achieve that vision of that integrated infrastructure that's going to be needed, and to be able to analyze if we needed additional manpower and resources. So while the department has provided some information on how it intends to spend $24 billion for Golden Dome, that was provided in last year's reconciliation bill. That includes radars and satellites, interceptors. This is going to be, as you know, a multi-year effort, and it's going to require more funding in the future. So I and Senator King, we're going to continue to work very closely with General Gutlein as he closes in on what that final architecture and the cost and the schedule information will be associated with that. So I'm going to continue to work with the administration and the department to ensure that we are going to have the technology that we need in order to detect and track and defeat any missile threats to our homeland.
This is related, I think, to the reconciliation question, but earlier this year, President Donald Trump pitched a $1.5 trillion defense budget, which would mark, I believe, the largest increase in defense spending in a century. How much of that, in your view, will have to be made up of reconciliation? And similarly,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Sure, absolutely. So earlier this year, President Donald Trump pitched a $1.5 trillion defense budget. How much of that, in your view, would have to be made up of reconciliation to reach that? Is that something that's, going to be determined ultimately by appropriators? And, can the Pentagon spend that amount similarly to, how industry has to react to reconciliation?
I'm glad the president increased, or hopefully will increase his budget request. The last several years and the last couple of years with the Biden administration, the Senate Armed Services Committee, we increased the numbers that came in from the Biden administration. We did that last year as well. The House did not, so we didn't get a full top line that we were hoping to. But it's helpful, I think, that the administration sends that in. Again, your questions: can you spend it all in a short period of time? I would go back to my previous comments on that. I think there are a number of items out there. If you just look at the unfunded priority list, that the services and the combatant commands put forward every year. This would, I think, give us a good opportunity to be able to listen to the services, listen to the combatant commanders, and give us a chance to start prioritizing some of those unfunded requests as well. They don't quite fit into the budget that we deal with, but that doesn't mean they're not necessary. There's many that are necessary, and I always encourage the services, and I encourage our combatant commanders to give us that list so we know that we aren't able to meet every need that's out there. So if you increase the funding for the department, that would only help in that regard.
So this discussion of a $1.5 trillion defense budget is coming amid, again, a different geopolitical situation with the current war in Iran. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask, too, about this, Senator. In 2023, you joined many of your colleagues in voting against legislation that would repeal the authorization for the use of military force against Iraq. Earlier this month, you joined many of your colleagues in voting against a war powers resolution that would have required the administration to seek congressional approval before continuing military action against Iran. Based on these votes and with your knowledge and experience of national security issues, what do you understand about the administration's rationale for going to war with Iran? And how is it the same or differ from other past GWOT conflicts in your view?
I believe the president has the legal authority to take the decisive action that he took last week and that he continues to do now. He has informed Congress. He informed the Gang of Eight. He has had his administration officials here, from Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense, General Kane, giving us briefings. In fact, our Armed Services Committee tomorrow morning will have a briefing. And it's, I think he's within his legal authority to do that. If you remember, I hate to get into politics right now, but that's kind of where we are. But Senator Kane, in I believe it was January, said he had a number of resolutions set to go, and that he would continue to keep introducing those to use up time in the Senate. I disagree with that kind of strategy. We have a lot of work that we need to do in the Senate, and I believe as long as the administration is giving Congress briefings, which they're doing, the president has some leeway under the War Powers Act. But it's which every president has said is unconstitutional. It's never been challenged. But he has time to do it. Second point on this: Iran is the state sponsor of terrorism around the world. They are an existential threat to the United States. They have killed, through their proxies, hundreds of Americans. They are continuing to work on nuclear weapons. The administration has been very, very clear on what their military objectives are here. It is to make sure that they take out the nuclear program that Iran has. It is to make sure that they take out the ballistic missile program that Iran has. And if you look at the short-range ballistic missiles that they have and the mid-range, within a year or so, they were on track to be able to have an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile. So that puts Europe into play. And as I say, it's a hop, skip, and a jump then to put the United States in play for them as well as a target. So I'm very, very supportive of taking out those two programs that Iran continues to build on. And the third reason we have been given, Congress has been given, that the administration is doing this, is to take out their Navy. And they are moving forward on that. So I think the administration's been very clear. I agree with their actions. We have had a threat there that the words that have been given in the past did not end that threat, did not temper that threat. And this is decisive action that needed to happen.
One way the war in Iran appears to be different from some past Middle Eastern conflicts from a strategic standpoint, and what we're seeing in the first weeks of this war is the use of drones. One Army official told Defense One recently that challenge and threat of unmanned systems is going to far exceed the threat that we saw from IEDs during the GWAT era. Outside of Golden Dome, do you believe the Pentagon has done enough to prioritize innovations and spending to counter the drone threat on the battlefield itself?
Well, what we learned, one of the lessons we've learned from Russia invading Ukraine, that wars changed. The manner of wars changed because of drones. That's been a major issue. We saw a drone strike in Kuwait that killed 6, now 7 American soldiers, 1 from Nebraska. And are we prepared for it? Not 100%. You know, we have been able to put up, and our partners in the region as well have been able to have defensive systems in place. But it's obvious through the deaths that we have seen of Americans, the deaths of from other countries as well, that we have not been 100% successful in stopping them. We need to do better.
Senator Fischer, thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights with us. We really appreciate being able to cover a wide range of topics in a very short period of time. I don't even think I got to half of the questions that I wanted to, so thank you for making yourself available.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Next, we will take a closer look at one of the Air Force's most ambitious modernization efforts, and that's collaborative combat aircraft.